talk about your mother's art, that you talk about the extraordinary balancing act that she did, the heroic balancing act she did as a mother and as a wife and as an artist, fighting to keep her art alive and not having it consumed by the extraordinary life that the Brzezinskis have had through the years, where they have hosted some of the most important meetings, I can say, at times at their house. Like, for instance, I don't know how many of you can say this about your home, but their home was used to celebrate the normalization of relations between China and the United States of America. Anybody? Anybody? No. We had a couple of Little League meetings at our house growing up, but that was about it. But they're an extraordinary family. They can be at times a tough family. Mika, show your purse. Show your purse. As we were coming over, Mrs. Brzezinski said, "Mika, you are not going to be carrying that red purse with that green dress, are you?" It reminded me of the first time I had Dr. Brzezinski on, and he said, "You know," to me, "you are stunningly superficial." Hey, do not applaud that line. This is my town, okay? Don't applaud that line. But anyway, I will leave it at that. But the tough love that this family lives by is more love than tough. But it has created an extraordinary. It has created a man that many people say is one of the two most important geopolitical strategists of the 20th century. It has produced a remarkable news host. It has produced the ambassador to Sweden. It has produced a man who ran NATO defense policy during the Bush administration, even though the family doesn't like to admit that. And it has produced an extraordinary artist, and I can't wait to hear about the lure of the forest. Please welcome Emilie and Mika Brzezinski.
Thank you. It is, wow, we're back in New Canaan. Can you all hear me? Is this working?
Yeah. How do you know we're back in New Canaan, Mika?
Because it's raining.
Exactly.
Every time we come here, it's a monsoon.
Every time.
Is it me? But this is a really proud moment for me, and it is Mother's Day, which makes it perfect, actually. So, Mom, I first of all want to thank you for coming here and letting me share you with New Canaan. Let's get right into your book, because I would call her over the past 3 years, say, "Mom, how are you doing? What are you doing?" And she'd say, "I'm working on my monograph." And I'm like, "What's a monograph?" She goes, "It's my life's work. Don't worry about it." And I'm like, no, I want to know. What is a monograph? And a monograph and what she was working on is what a lot of accomplished artists do when their career is so full and rich and dynamic that they want to put it all into place. And this was so important to her that I joined in the process and wrote the introduction, but helped her compile what is now The Lore of the Forest. Could you share with the audience why you found this so profoundly important to do, given everything you're balancing in life?
Well, I think what I...
Move the mic.
Hello? Can people hear me?
Bring it closer to your mouth.
A little closer. Here, try this one. My microphone's always loud for some reason.
Hello? All right. What I was going to say was that as you go through life and you work on various themes and subjects and materials, you don't really make a trajectory in your mind as to what I'm saying and what I'm trying to do with my sculpture. But if I...
Here, I'll do it. You go ahead.
Okay. But if I make a book about it, I begin to get the dates all in order. And when I begin to put it all out in a series of chapters, then you can see what you have done in your life. And what was amazing to me was that starting from the beginning and going right through, I had themes that repeated over and over again. Negative space, for example. Detail of, rough detail of the surface of the material. Direct handling. Even the approach, which was basically a direct, instinctive approach as opposed to, thinking about what you're going to do. So all these things came out in the book, in the sense that they were all there from the beginning to the end. And this, for me, was a real gratification.
I want you to explain, if you can, your obsession with wood. And you talked a little bit at the Thrive Conference, we're going to show some slides in just a moment, about how much you loved being in your studio. But you work with such massive trunks of wood, and this is 30 years of collecting tree trunks. Why wood?
Well, my family comes from Bohemia, from the Czech Republic. And anyone who grew up there knows that the forest is very important to their life. It's a place of solace, it's a place of recreation, it's a place of beauty, it's a place for mushroom hunting. All of these things take place in the forest. And so every Czech has instilled in them a certain sense of reverence to the forest. Well, I happened not to have been born in Czech Republic. I was born in Switzerland. But somehow, this feeling about wood was transferred from my parents to myself. And so that's why I work in wood.
Perfect. I'm going to try and work this. Joe, do you think I can? Oh, beautiful.
Yes.
Okay, I have... So, Mom, which one is this? Can you tell us the title?
This was a piece that I did. This is a piece that I did for biennial in Canada. And it's called Skyward Oaks. It's made out of red oak. The vertical element here is extremely important. I try to emphasize it. All wood has direction. And this is where their personality comes out. And these pieces were amazingly upward moving, upward mobile.
And I look at the scope and the size of these, and how much do these weigh? Any idea?
Well, they're between 800 pounds, 1,000.
She has a studio that is attached to their house in McLean, which is maybe like 8 garages. I don't know the size, but huge. And she has a winch, and she pulls these around like as if they're dancing and cuts them with a chainsaw. And until this year, where she's going to be a spokesperson for Steel Chainsaw's marketing campaign, Real People Steel People. My mom will begin this year, thanks to Steel Chainsaws, wearing protective gear. Okay.
I actually had said she was the most talented of the Brzezinskis. She is also the most feared because she is constantly armed with a chainsaw anytime you see her around the property.
Okay, I'm going to move to the next one. Can you look, Mom? Hold the mic close. Tell us what this one is.
This is called Sprites, and this is an extraordinary wood which has lots of cross grains in it. Cross grains going one direction and then another direction as it grows on the trunk. And as you chip these cross grains, they don't chip straight as in oak, but they have a little wiggle in them. And this is what has happened here, where the surface is a whole series of directional wiggles.
I love that one. These are, a person would be about halfway up that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, they're like 12 feet?
Yeah, about 12 feet, I would say.
The first one, it would just go halfway up.
Yeah.
Person.
And then now behind you is Lament. This is you and me at the Thrive Conference 2 weeks ago that we hosted at the City Center in New York. You would not believe what it took to get these 3 massive sculptures in there. I don't think they will ever speak to me again. But aren't they beautiful? It's actually my favorite, Mom. Lament. Tell us the story of how these three pieces came to work together and about the title.
Well, the title Lament actually comes from the wood because the wood is it almost cries in front of you. It's bent over, it is twisting, it is sad. So that the lament was within the wood. I started with this piece right there, which is bent double. You don't find red oak bent this way very often. In fact, I felt very lucky to have found this single piece. I took it immediately because it's very hard to discover these extraordinary pieces of wood. I finished it as a sculpture called Lament, but as a single piece, it wasn't enough. It needed something to react against. And so I got the second one, which was satisfactory. I showed that also in Grounds for Sculpture in New Jersey. But in my studio, there was a piece of wood that I didn't know what to do with it. And
kind of like Mika growing up, right?
I am a tree. Trust me.
And so that it all of a sudden occurred to me, this is what's going to finish Lament. And with great enthusiasm, I carved it, and it worked. So here it is.
So let me ask a question that I'm sure a lot of people are asking. One of the most remarkable parts of the process is where you find these trees. You talk about being lucky, so lucky to find the tree that became the centerpiece of Lament. What process do you go through? I'm sure you can't go on eBay or Craigslist to find a tree like this. So how do you do it? Where do you find it?
Well, I find my trees anywhere they are. Now, I do remember spending a huge amount of time taking a huge tree trunk from the middle of a very busy 4-lane highway. But I had to get the police behind me. So there was this young policeman, and I got him to stop the traffic for at least half an hour.
If you knew the Brzezinskis, this would not surprise you.
But what was
For half an
amazing,
hour.
what was amazing is that during this process of half an hour of cutting and pulling this thing out, nobody made a peep. I mean, American public is amazingly...
Mom, I think they were a little confused. I'm just going to say. I'm sure it wasn't reverence. No, my mom finds a lot of things on the side of the road, and I'm not going to tell a roadkill story right now. I'm not going to do that. But I will say that there was another one on an island in Maine where we were just having a picnic, and she said, "Oh, I have to have that trunk." And she convinced, a lobster man to tow it? Or what happened?
Exactly. I decided it was a good piece of wood because I banged it and it resonated. And so it was worth it to make an effort to get it. The waterman came and got the wood and pulled it on shore. Then it was taken to a local home where I was able to chainsaw it the next summer. And the summer after that, I picked it up and brought it to my house.
You drove it in a truck yourself.
Yes, I did. And that shows how compulsive you can be. But then it went on a trip to Europe. Not alone, but with 45 other pieces of wood, and it went to various capitals shown as the forest.
But I think of my father pacing in his bedroom in McLean, Virginia, as my mother drove from Northeast Harbor, Maine, all the way to McLean, Virginia, driving a huge flatbed herself. And he was pacing, going, "She's crazy. How can she do this? She's crazy. She's crazy." And 14 hours later, I heard, "She's home. She's home." And he went running out, and right now, he's pacing, right now, in McLean, Virginia, doing the same thing. But I'm trying to think if there were any others, because it wasn't embarrassing at all to have your mother do this, at all. Not on school property, wherever she ended up deciding she wanted something, she was there hacking away at it. And I understand it now, I do. Mom, tell us about this one.
Well, this is when there was a show in D.C. of an artist I had admired in the past, and I can't think of his name, Roy Lichtenstein. Roy Lichtenstein did a series of drawings and paintings and sculpture of a theme called Brushstrokes in Flight. And it came to Washington 2 years ago, or a year ago, and it was such a strong presence there for me that I had to again do something which was very close to that type of expression. Cherry wood is one which often has big sweeps of direction, and this is the wood I used in order to create several pieces. The whole point of it being that there is a movement in direction in the sculpture itself.
And now we have, is this this is a different one? Sorry.
That's the same one.
The same one, right.
These pieces are taken from the matrix of the wood and pieced together in a different sort of way.
Beautiful. And here's another one of my favorites. My favorite so far is Lament, but this one is in upstate New York.
Yes.
The name of it again?
I can't
Wait, I know you. What was it, Joseph? Passage.
Passage.
And I love this one. I remember it because as a horseback rider, I want to jump it.
Yes, well, this is typical of you. This is a piece actually which I did not, this is a piece that I actually did not install. It was the curator of the group which put it actually there. But I think it is a fabulous way to present it. And it does to me, it does remind me of a passage somewhere in the desert, for example, where there's a long line of camels and you can see it move forward slowly. So anyway, I love this piece. These are enormous pieces of wood. They look rather small there, but let's just say they are at least that high. They are at least this high. And so that you can imagine the scope of this piece. It went all over the top of this mountain. And the effect is, for me, very heartening.
Phenomenal. Okay, we have me. I am a tree as well. What was it like working on me?
Oh, it was very difficult and challenging.
I expected that answer, don't worry.
For Mika was impossible.
No, go ahead. You were just saying she was
impossible as a student.
Yeah.
And she went all the way through college. But always the difficulty with, learning and putting herself, applying herself. And then as soon as she got out and got a job, she says, "Mom, why didn't I study?"
That's true, actually. But
I heard about your days at Williams just today. Jack, my 5-year-old, was at T-ball practice at Waveney Park, and a guy came up to me that was coaching Jack and said, I know Mika. I said, "Oh, how do you know Mika?" He said, "I went to Williams College, and there was a football player who had a crush on her, and my job was to take beer to Mika and present it as a gift."
Well, that's very nice.
This is something that both Mrs. Brzezinski and I just learned about today.
Wonderful.
But she will say, Mrs. Brzezinski will say, and she has been very consistent, anytime anybody goes, "Oh, how was Mika as a child?" She'll go, "Oh, very difficult child." But I learned the Brzezinskis, I talked about tough love before. Dr. Brzezinski, the first time he was on the show, called me stunningly superficial. A week later, I met Ian Brzezinski, who was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, and we were at the Russards, and it was a Christmas party, and the show had just started, and I said, "Oh, Mika, I've just got to say, Mika is one of the smartest, most intuitive people I've ever met. I've never seen anybody that can work a room or work an interview better than her." And Ian cut me off. He said, Mika had the lowest SAT score in the history of Williams College. And I thought that was tough until 6 months later, Mrs. Brzezinski came to a book tour for All Things at Once. Mika's first book, New York Times bestseller, dedicated to Mrs. Brzezinski. I called her up on stage. I said, "Ms. Brzezinski, tell us something about Mika that none of us know." And everybody was waiting for that hallmark moment since Mika had dedicated the book to Mrs. Brzezinski. She thought about it, and then she said, Mika had the lowest SAT score in the history. They're tough.
They're tough.
They are tough.
We have to measure up.
You sure do, and you have.
So I definitely asked for that since more me. What can I say? That was us at Thrive, and my mother talked to a crowd of 2,000 about her sculptures. Now you wonder what this is. And I will set the scene for this, Mom, and then let you explain the piece. My mother is still working on a show that we're having a big show in September in Washington at the Krieger Museum, where 12 of her pieces, which I believe are already done, are going to be put on display, including Lament, which is going to be gorgeous. But she's not done yet. When I was interviewing her for the piece that we showed on the show on Friday, I was sitting on this massive trunk that was being held up by a chain, and this picture is ultimately going to have something to do with that.
Well,
What is this picture of?
I'm going to start with the trunk.
Okay.
I found a trunk. Okay, here we go. I have a friend in Charlottesville, and occasionally we talk, and one day she phones up and she says, I have the most fantastic trunk for you. And so, I said, because lots of people do that. But she sent me a photograph, and I loved the trunk. And I spent a wad of money bringing it up to my house. And then I started to carve it. I didn't know what to do with it, but I said, this just needs emptying, and these needs to be carved out. And then there was the Ukraine crisis, and I saw in the newspaper a photograph of Kiev Square filled with heads yearning for a new life. All of them sad, none of them smiling. I said, this is an extraordinary photograph, and I'm going to use it in my new project, which is Kiev Trunk, where I will place the photographs of these people inside the trunk and show the masses within the trunk, which is representing the state. The trunk has a crack going right through it, and I have left it visible so that there is a deeper message here, is that the whole country is falling apart.
That's going to be an incredible piece. The book is The Lore of the Forest, and it's absolutely beautiful. My mom and I set out to work on it together, just over a year ago. And except for, I'm trying to think, I can't think of anything where your vision actually completely comes out exactly as you pictured it. And this book is beautiful. And when you page through it, you see beautiful photo after photo after photo of these trunks and these trees and their stories, and artists writing about them, and my mother telling her story herself. And I couldn't be more proud of her. We haven't even scratched the surface of the span of her career, which goes decades, but the book certainly does.
It is. After I saw the book and leafed through it, I told Mika, and then I told the publisher, which really surprised the publisher, because most people that deal with Mika and me are used to, complaints. We're very tough people. We're like the Brzezinskis and the Scarboroughs. We're very tough. And the guy came up to us and goes, what do you think of the book? It's like he was asking for more porridge. And I said, it's extraordinary. It's one of the first things I've ever seen in my life where what was up here in Mrs. Brzezinski and Mika's mind and what I had hoped to see actually somehow got translated to the pages. And it's extraordinary, and it tells an extraordinary story. And I'd love to open up for questions, Mika, but before we do that, we've got Mother's Day tomorrow. And
yes.
I want you to tell me about your mother, and we've talked about All Things at Once, the book, but talk about the example that your mother set growing up.
Well, I was a difficult child, and on that note, can my two difficult children stand up, please? Girls, are you here? I saw them sneak in. So I will say...
Wait. For Mother's Day, have them come up. I'm getting off the stage.
Girls, come here.
Coming up, girls.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's awful. They're going to kill
bad.
you, Joe.
I don't care. Carly, I'll buy you a purse. Come on up. Let's go. Come on. I can't,
goodness.
leverage is very important. in politics.
So, Mom, I will
Oh, look,
say.
look how fast she's coming up.
Look, Carly's great.
Oh, okay.
Carly Hoffer, Emilie Hoffer. Welcome to New
Coming
Canaan. Oh, my Lord. I should have approved these outfits. Can you say hello? Say hi to Bamba.
Hi,
So-
Carly.
Mom, I will say, don't worry, they're getting me back. Amelia, have a seat. Sit next to Bamba.
So let's talk about Mother's Day. And first, you're going to get a chance to talk about your mom. Then I'm going to have your daughters talk about you.
Oh, no, because we want to open it up to questions and wrap soon. But that's our next time. But my mother was, as I said in my book, All Things at Once, which she says is all lies, was a woman before her time, because she knew exactly who she was from the get-go: an artist, a wife, and a mother. All things equally important to her identity, and she never let go even through the toughest times. It took me a lot longer, and I only knew that once I wrote the book, and I realized All Things at Once, which was supposed to be some sort of shallow, self-involved memoir, was really all about her and all about everything I've learned that I finally put on paper and finally tried to live for. And so I'm deeply grateful, Mom, for everything you did, even though I didn't perhaps express it as a child. And I'm doing my best with these two, but I think they still look to you, quite frankly, as the
No, you
greatest.
actually have a huge image in your family.
Oh, I do, okay. An imprint.
And I, as a grandmother, I'm terribly proud of the children. And as a mother, I'm terribly proud of Mika. It is something that
Okay.
Thanks, Mom.
You want to just end on that, don't you? End while you're ahead.
Great way to wrap.
Carly, you want to say anything? You want to sing anything? Carly, anything? Anything? Okay. Amelia, you want to run? Amelia's going to Johns Hopkins scholarship. She's going to be the track star there next year. And we got to get Dad to stand up, because he's the one that was her basically your trainer.
Dad?
Dad,
Yeah.
stand up, Dad. Look, wait, hold on, look at. So Jim, look at it. They're all fit.
Yesterday's
I
story.
don't know why they're all fit. They all run. They all exercise. It
and
makes me very.
Because
it
of
makes me
Jim,
very
yesterday,
nervous.
when you fly now to Japan, you can be assured that your plane will not have a light stuck in the hull of the plane, given his investigation yesterday, which revealed that as well.
Well,
on
thank
Channel
God.
7.
I haven't flown to Japan until now. I'm not
Yes.
safe to go to Japan. But Jim's won like about 837 Emmys.
Yes.
It's just you go in the house and it's just all jammed.
My mom's going to be available to sign some books. If we have any quick questions for her, I know you all have busy weekends, but I can come to you with the mic if there's anything that you would like to ask her, or Joe, or Amelia, or Carly, or Jim. Right here.
Jim says no.
Thank you all so much. That was really amazing. I wanted to ask Emilie, how did you get started sculpting wood?
Well, as a child, I used a penknife. Then it got bigger. And by the time I was in college, I was doing larger pieces. But I had no idea that I was going to be a sculptor. It's only when I started to, after my children came, I started to look around for what I was going to be when I grow up. And it was then that I started to work more seriously on larger pieces, first with plastics, then with rubber mold, and then finally with wood.
Beautiful. The rubber molds on the trees freaked me out, I'm just going to say, but they're actually really beautiful when they're done. Any other questions? Right over here.
Thank you so much for this. The sculptures are absolutely extraordinary, and your work is wonderful, and thank you for sharing about it. On the large standing trees, especially Lament, which is leaning over, can you share with us how you balance them? Do they have steel in the ground, or how long, and how do you calculate that?
Yes, I can answer that. It's a very easy technical process. You stand the wood up and wedge it so that it balances perfectly. And then you take a line, you put it on a pencil, you take a pencil and put it on another pencil, and then you walk around the sculpture, making an indentation where the cut is supposed to be. And then it's a simple case of taking a chainsaw and cutting it.
No, anybody can do it. Hey, kids, try that at home, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not good at that.
Channel 7's Jim Hoffer has a question for you.
Yes.
Hi, Bumba.
Hi.
This has nothing to do with art, at least I don't think so. But one of the more fascinating stories, I think, that you've told is the one about your crossing of the Atlantic when you were a small child with your mother. And I guess basically fleeing Nazi Germany, correct? Can you tell me about what happened on that trip? I think you know what I'm talking about on the boat. There was an event that kind of had everyone on edge as you crossed the Atlantic.
Well, I think that refers to our transatlantic crossing in the middle of the war, the Second World War. I was 9 years old, or 8 years old, and it was decided that my father would go to San Francisco to be Consul General. And so we took a trip across the Atlantic. This was during the height of the war. There were submarines everywhere, and boats traveled by convoy, where you get about 10 or 15 boats together so that there's more safety. And during that trip, there was a huge storm where the waves were going up and down the way Atlantic can be. And at the same time, there was a U-boat attack. And we got hit. We actually had a torpedo go right through the hull of our boat. But nothing happened. And everyone was asked to come up on deck, and then they were told to go down into the boat again because nothing was going on. They sent 2 divers down, and they pried this torpedo out of the boat. It had only broken 1 lock in the boat, and so that we were able to float, and we were safe to go. Unfortunately, that night, there were many people lost in the waves, because at least 2 boats went down. The whole sky was lit up with orange because gasoline was burning everywhere. But we made it home, and so here I am.
Wow.
Wow.
You notice that Jim called my mom Bumba. So when my girls were born, my parents said they wanted names, and they didn't want to be grandma and grandpa. And my mom came up with that. Guess what my dad came up with? Chief. And he wanted them to salute.
What a surprise.
Yeah. Any other questions before we head upstairs? Right here.
I'd just like to know if the split in the tree has to do with the divide between the Ukrainian-speaking and the Russian-speaking population in Ukraine?
I missed that.
Does the split in the tree, Ukraine trunk, have anything to do with the division between the Russians and the Ukrainians?
It actually, as a viewer, you can make it mean whatever you want. For me, it is representing the split in the country, because the trunk, to me, represents the country. And the people
So to her it
inside
does.
miserable.
Any others? I think we'll go up and sign books. What do you think, Joe?
Good. Thank you guys so much for coming out.
So much.
We really appreciate it.